to penetrate a new organization, they will start to look for which assets they have and which operating systems they have and which application they use, and accordingly they can decide how they will attack this company or how they attack this corporate environment, right? So in order really to defend them or to wait to stop these attackers to get into our organization or maybe corporate environment, we really need to understand our assets and build defenses against this attacks. Okay, but if you really doesn't see all these kind of assets, then it would open the door more, because again the mere principle here is if you cannot see it, if you cannot visualize it, you cannot protect it. So any devices in your organization, whether it's a camera, whether it's an IoT, whether an IT systems, or whether even a subcontractor that he bring his own device to work within the company during a certain period of time, you really need to be aware of all these assets and categorize these assets. Because if you don't categorize this asset and understand what is really their vulnerability attack service, then the attacker can use this and really cause a harm. So this is really why asset management is important. And another thing that's why asset management is important is because not all the assets and not all the data that we have in our organization, we can treat it in the same way, right? Because some data and some assets, they call it the crown jewels, which is really important for our organization to operate and produce. Okay, so if we have one of these assets is impacted, it can really impact the whole operation of a company. And for sure, this is going to be reflected in our revenues and in our also reaching to our objectives. So we really need to understand also that not all assets are important and not all the information is important. And we have seen this when we were talking yesterday about vulnerability management and how to do a vulnerability management within the organization. So you start with asset inventory, and then right after the asset inventory, you look at the information management. You need to understand what information are saved in a certain place and how important this information is to the company. This is by doing an interview and really having a good connection to the management to understand the criticality and the impact of losing these kind of assets. So this is very important, and this is very early basic tasks that you really need to understand. You really need to sit, or you read if you cannot really have this in a manual sheet, because it's going to be hectic for you. Sometimes if you work in a big bank or a big government institution or a big corporate environment like oil and gas, they have tons and thousands of machinery and assets, and all of them are computerized. So you really need to have a software that it will help you to really, first of all, inventory all these assets, okay, in an automated way. Or you can just run in map to really find all these assets which is alive, and having it in a sheet or maybe an HTML report that you really later on you can view. So we're gonna teach you, inshallah, in cybersecurity ethical hacking course. That's how you really can collect these assets and understand what live assets exist in this organization. So inshallah, I think the course, inshallah, in ethical hacking will be very beneficial because it has a lot of hands-on experience. That's why we will be dedicating only one in the morning. We will be having a lecture of 1 hour and a half, and then Abir will give you guys a demo, and also Asad will give you a demo. This is because ethical hacking is all about hands-on experience, not about a lot of talking like risk management and the other stuff that we were talking about. Okay, so we mentioned that once we have this done, once we understand the assets, once we understand the information in these assets, we conduct risk assessment. And the risk assessment in a very basic way is trying to understand what is the likelihood of a threat to exploit a vulnerability. So that's really require you to understand what is the threats landscape for this organization, okay, and what is the vulnerability exist in this organization, and see the likelihood of one of these threats to really compromise or to exploit, because we explained yesterday what we mean by exploit. Okay, so this is the entry point for the attacker to take an advantage of one of these exploited. uh, vulnerabilities and then have a footprint within the organization. So we need to understand the likelihood. And we kind of yesterday we didn't talk about vulnerability scoring. I have already added to the sheets that I give it to you guys in Discord. But the really how can we really tell the vulnerability score? And the vulnerability score, guys, they use something called CVSS. Okay, the CVSS, if you guys allow me, because this is a little bit important, the CVSS is a common vulnerability scoring system. And this scoring system is just there because we wanted to really agree about a score for a vulnerability. What we mean by this, okay? What we mean by this, what if I find vulnerability, okay, and maybe Ibtihal find a vulnerability, and maybe Ibtisam find a vulnerability, okay? And all of them are vulnerabilities. All of them are the same, sorry, all of them are the same vulnerability, okay? And but for me, I could really exploit this vulnerability internally. So I give it really low score because no one from external network will be able to really exploit this vulnerability because it only can be done if I'm authenticated user here. Okay, while Ibtisam, when she was trying to do this vulnerability assessment, she figured out that this vulnerability will compromise also confidentiality and integrity, okay? And it can be done by external resources, okay? So we kind of have the same vulnerability, but we disagree about how to exploit this vulnerability. Some of us are saying internally and some of us are saying externally. So they said that we needed a framework, we needed a process to really, to really come up with a score. And how they come up with a score was very interesting. They started to develop something called CVSS calculator, okay, and they have two version called version 3 and another version called 3.1. And the difference between different versions is a lot of consideration when it comes to vulnerabilities. But the main way to calculate the vulnerability score, guys, is by giving the score according to what? According to multiple criteria. Some of them are called core criteria, and the core criteria, they will say, okay, what? Let me figure out if this vulnerability can be exploited internally, locally, or it can be exploited using the network. So this is one of the criteria. Okay, this criteria is this vulnerability can be really can be done, can be exploited using an authenticated user or non-privileged user. So this is another criteria. If this vulnerability can impact my confidentiality alone, or it's gonna be impacted my integrity alone, or it's gonna be impacted my availability alone, or it's gonna impacted all of them. Okay, so this is another criteria. Okay, as this vulnerability can be can be exploited using a local account, or it need to be a privileged account, because this is a different criteria. Some of them are, we mentioned that if you need a privileged account, that means you need to do privilege escalation, which is usually hard in some environment. So with calculating all this with calculating all of these factors, let me show you how it looks like, guys. If you can see my screen over here, okay. So I will show you a very quick example how this CVCS is calculating this. So I will just go here. I will go to Mr. Google and I will say CVSS 3.1 calculator. Okay, and then I will go to NVD common vulnerability scoring system vulnerability version 3.1. Okay, so this is the calculator. And as you can see, guys, this is the calculator that allow us to really, calculate the scores. Some of these are, they call it temporal score. It's not as important. The most important thing that's, I would say, this is the attack vector, the basic score. And you can see, once you started to play this with this number, it should start to create some sort of score. So I would say this attack vector, this vulnerability can be really exploited by a network, okay? And this is the complexity of the attacks. Do we need really a high skill in attackers to attack it, or can be anyone to attack? So I would say low, okay? privilege required? Do we require some user who to be privileged to exploit this vulnerability? I would say none, or I can say high. So this is the high. That means I need a privileged user to do it. Okay. User interaction. Do we have to have the end user who is sitting in machine right now to interact with the attacker in order for this vulnerability to be exploited? For sure, if you need to trick the user to do something, it would be even harder, right? So I would say no, the attacker can do this. Okay. Scope confidentiality, I would say it has a high impact, and high impact when it comes to integrity, and high impact when it comes to integrity, and the scope unchanged. Okay. So once I do this, guys, let me just usually when you do this here, it will show you your vector scoring CVCS. It usually give you like a score. Yes, here, look at the score here, guys. The score here is 7.2. Okay. If you change anything here, see, just the changing anything, it will impact the vulnerability scoring. Okay. So if it's, and as you can see, the score is changing as soon as, and once you really analyze, this is where the bug bounty program, and this is where the security researchers, okay, guys, will be able to say, okay, this vulnerability has this score. How did they do this? They collect all of these criteria, and then just click these points. And if you wanted to really to see how this really calculation is done, there's another website. It will tell you exactly what kind of calculation they used in the background really to check these metrics. Okay, guys. Okay, guys. So far, so good. You understand how this vulnerability scoring are working. It's easy. Okay, I just wanted to show you this yesterday, but I had to run very quickly. But this is part of the risk assessment, because the risk assessment is gonna give us end of day an evaluation for what risk we have. Okay, we identify the risk, we give a priority for this risk or severity for this risk. Okay, and once we give the severity for risk, we go back to really the management, and this is very important, to ask the management that we have find this risk, and according to our calculation, according to the threat landscape that exists right now, and mashallah yesterday, and the impact, bravo Shaza, okay, that's the impact as well. We can say to the management, this is can cause this is the cause severe damage to our assets, or this is can cause medium damage, or this is can cause low damage. So we can score it medium, low, or high, or maybe we can score it by numbers like 9.2, 10, and then we map these numbers to critical low. But end of day, we need to make our story to the management appealing. So we can say this is with such risk, there is another company that's already had the same risk before and then been exploited. And that's why in the yesterday presentation, guys, I give you like 3 or 4 stories about different industry that's being exploited because some of the vulnerability that exist in their environment. So really managing vulnerability inside your organization is high. And that's why, guys, there is a job right now started to emerge called VA, BT. If you go to LinkedIn, you can find a new job right now is being created called VABT. So what is it stand for vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. Okay, so this is kind of like combining 2 jobs together. So the vulnerability assessment used to be done by the risk engineers. Okay, but again, the problem with the vulnerability scanner, the automated way to find vulnerability, it is not really 100% accurate. It can create a lot of false positive. That is for sure. Okay, so if we have a lot of false positive, I cannot really come to the management with a list of 10,000 vulnerabilities and 10,000 risks and say, let's really find a solution for all of this. This is going to be like really, first of all, they will not agree about it because no one have 10,000 risk at the same time and we need to handle it. And all of them is high. Another thing that we really need to figure out that even for IT department is going to be like almost impossible to deal with all this risk. So what can we do, guys? We need to combine the vulnerability management life cycle with the penetration testing. This is the complete picture, as they say. So the complete picture, once we find a vulnerability, guys, once I find something suspicious in the report, I need to validate if it's really a vulnerability or no. Okay, and that's exactly what the attacker will do as well. The attacker will not get just the vulnerability assessment tools, and he get one of your vulnerabilities already exposed, and then he will say, okay, this is a vulnerability, let me attack it. He will try to validate it. Sometimes, yes, sometimes we can, if we don't have the penetration testers skills within the organization, I would highly recommend that you get someone who's really skilled to do the penetration test. Even to the point that I know some people who work in penetration testing, and the way they do penetration testing right now, guys, to motivate the company to really work in penetration testing. So what they're saying, before they said, okay, you know what, you conduct the penetration testing and tell us about all the vulnerability that you can compromise, and give us a recommendation about how to solve this issue. Okay, guys. So this is used to be the case before, and the company used to pay them money, okay, to do this. So the penetration tester will know that he will go through certain steps, okay, and once he found the vulnerability, he will go back to the company and highlight it to the company, right? This is how it used to be before. The new way to do it right now, and it's really puzzling my mind, but I really figure out why they do it. They go to the penetration testers and they say, you know what, okay, we will not give you any money, okay, until you find a valid vulnerability. Valid vulnerability means a vulnerability that you can exploit. Don't come up with like a list of vulnerability that exists that you cannot. I will only give you money per vulnerability, per exploit. Okay, like Google. Okay, so why you guys they do these things, right? Because they wanted really the attackers or the penetration testers to be really aggressive. Okay, why is he really aggressive? Because they wanted really to simulate an attacks. So I will only get paid if I find valid vulnerability. So I will do my so. Yani sometimes this guys he will do his jobs and maybe he will come back to your company and say, okay, you know what, I did my job, but I found a vulnerability. So I will only give you into exploiting my systems. I wanted really to motivate him. So this is like a bug bounty program. We will only give you if you find a good vulnerability, you will get paid. So this is what happened, guys, and we explain why penetration testing in a very simple way, because we can, inshallah, look at penetration testing in more details and the methodology of penetration testing, inshallah, in next few weeks. Inshallah, when we finish next week, I know maybe some of you guys are going to this. I don't know. There is an event called Black Hat, inshallah, next week in Riyadh. I don't know if you guys will be able to travel and see it or no. So we, at least for the next week, we are still doing our lecture on a timely basis. So every day in the morning we'll cover a topic, and we'll play a little bit with the clouds, because this is a new topic right now. That's I found it very interesting, and it doesn't require a lab environment. You can just play with it as much as you want. Okay, and until the next end of the next week will be taken easy, because some of you will decide to travel, some of you will be here, but again, the lecture will be recorded. The lecture will be covering the rest of the topics. As you can see, if we can go back here, we don't have much topics to talk about in the next few days. If you guys see here, I mean, we do have, but the thing is that we already know a little bit about it. So we will talk about hardware assurance tomorrow. So this is a new topic, okay, which is HSM. We mentioned we will cover it. We'll talk about privacy. and attack mitigations, okay? And then cloud security, we'll spend like 3 days in the cloud security with a revision. So this is kind of things that we have next week. So again, if you have the opportunity to travel, will be nice. If you don't, we'll be here covering these topics and having lecture every day and talking about a little bit about cloud, because it's easy for me. In order to really implement each hardware assurance, we wanted to have something like HSM. You can do HSM in the cloud in a click and double clicks. Okay, but if you really wanted to have an HSM solution installed in your system, this is going to be, or a lab about HSM is going to be a lot of work. So this is why we are covering this topic. Okay, so we mentioned also yesterday or the day before that the ethical hacking is important. It's not only important for us to learn as an skills, and maybe this is will be your passion to break into your system and find vulnerabilities. It's also important for the SOC engineer, because the SOC engineer can see all these traces the attackers are really how the attackers are interacting with the system. So if I have a system here, okay, and this is a real attacker, and this is our SOC engineer, okay, and he started to really do information gathering, especially active information gathering, or started to scan the system. The SOC engineer should be able to understand this movement and detect this in early as possible, and he can implement the incident response to mitigate the risk in early stages, or to mitigate the attacks in early stages, to be more precise. Okay, so we mentioned that and cover only two parts of penetration testing, which is we didn't cover it in really deep details. We're just covering it from like really high end prospect. So we covered the first stage, which is information gathering. We are looking at information gathering to gather data about the target. They call this target because this is going to be the victim machine or the target of the for the attacker to exploit. Okay, so he is really interesting to gather everything about your environment. Really interesting to understand your network diagrams. If he can, you really need to understand your operating system that works. You need to understand the application that runs over this operating system. You really need to understand also and get information about what kind of user you have in this organization. Okay, there is so many tools that will allow the attacker to gather information about someone working in a certain environment, because maybe this guy are using his email in a different social website, or maybe he's using the email to get some external, RS feeds or stuff. So really, the attackers, they have some tools to really get more information about users, or maybe these users are really in LinkedIn, so he can go and do social engineering on LinkedIn to one of these users. So the attacker really interested about everything in your IT when it comes to software, hardware, network, and he's also interested to know your employees and how they think and what kind of users they are, and what is their email address, what is their social emails, what is their social media presence. This is all important for the attackers, because this is will help them in the later stage when they tried to exploit the system, to really think about the best way to exploit the system. So we talked about these guys from the SOC perspective and from the attacker perspective. Was very important, and we have already covered information gathering, and we mentioned that information gathering divided into two operations. One is called passive operation, and one is called active. And a passive, when you are collecting data from online sources without interacting with a victim or the target. So this is basically you are using something called open source intelligence. Open source intelligence means that we're using Google, we're using we're using some tools that is not really directly contacting this service or contacting the victim, or it's contacting the victim in our behalf. So it's really collecting the DNS stuff, it's collecting the MX records and the mail server and all the stuff. So this is the passive one. This is called it open source intelligence, and it's really huge right now. because we have so many information that we can gather from these open sources. Okay, and it will make us stealth, and it will make us in the dark as an attacker or as penetration testers, because I'm not interacting with the server. So I'm not really into getting any information directly from the server. So this is the passive one. This is what we covered 2 days ago. We also talked about the active one. The active one is basically when you are really interacting with the server, and we really using some tools that we have already explained to really get some data from the servers. Okay. Some of them use their job to gather information against the company as well. Okay, you agree with you. So the social, I'm telling you, it's easy to trick. I would say that it's easy to trick human than it's really easy to trick a machine. Okay, because if you really build it a really nice defenses, okay, it's not easy to really bypass all these defenses. Okay, it's really need to, someone who's really good. But if you check most of the attacks that's happened recently, including the Uber attacks and all the attacks that's the even the Cornelia pipeline that's happening in the US, you will find mainly the credentials that's being stolen was one of the reasons that the attack is all started. Okay, even in the even in the supply chain attacks, the one that I was explaining to you guys a couple of days ago uh, about this company which is selling software to a lot of organization in the US, okay, and they are having a management software, okay, SolarWinds, is also that whole attack started by someone stealing credentials from someone, okay, or they called it the Russian were stealing a certain account that it was having access to the update server. So most of these attacks started with stealing or deleting or doing something with identity and access management. That's why it's very important when we look at things in security. The first thing, if you guys can see, you can see here identity and access management, and then right after this, awareness and training. So basically, both of them is really to establish how to protect access to your organization, and then you really wanted to really educate your users and employees and your customers about the security practice within this organization. So this is really important, and both of them really need to be in top level in order to access. Because once I would say, once you have one user compromised, okay, then this user, okay, if he has enough permission, okay, if he already part of the development or part of your sales team, they can cause a lot of harm, okay, because the attacker will not stop with this person. He will take the approach of island hopping, and he will start to hop between machine to machine until he really reach to the crown jewels that we talked about in early beginning today. Okay, so this is also we have already covered. I know that we already covered identity and access management, but I will try to cover identity and access management from the cloud perspective, and why I will try to explain it from the cloud perspective, because it's not easy for us guys to really give you a full lab about identity and access management, except if we do two things. So one of the things that we can do to implement identity and access management and do provisioning for user and create policy for user password and all the stuff is to create a whole environment of Active Directory. And Active Directory again is a special server in Windows environment that will allow you to manage user and to set policies and to activate user, delete user, set permission for user in one centralized place. So this is to create a domain. It will require a lot of work because you need to set up, first of all, Windows 2016 or 2019. You need to install Active Directory on top of it. And then you need to really set the permission on this Active Directory and create user. And then later on, you need to create a small machines, which is basically like I would say the client machine that will talk this to server. And using Kibros, which is a protocol for authentication, this machine will be authenticating and access another machines in the network. In order to see this scenario, guys, it's very important scenario, and I'm not saying it's not important to implement it. And I'm hopefully, inshallah, in the ethical hacking course, we will start to implement something like this, because we have at least to set up 3 different machines, and these machines are all interacting with each other. So we have the Active Directory where the policies and procedures are set, and we activate users. We have a machine that's logged into this domain as a client, and we have a server over here. So this is a simulation. And between us, most of the penetration testing that's happening right now, it's usually really trying to exploit these kind of domains, because this is really simulating the real environment, how this is the real environment is. Okay, so if we don't do identity and access management here because we need to set up a lot of resources, we can still, guys, do identity and access management. Uh, okay, and also if we cannot also do this right now because it's required, we can do the IAM, the identity and access management, in the cloud, and it's really double clicks, and it's easy to show you all the process from setting the security policy, creating users, and everything in the cloud. That's why it's easy. Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry, Lamia, you really need to have a powerful laptop. I'm sorry, this is gonna be a good investment. Believe me. If you don't have a powerful laptop, I would say that you can still do the same labs in the cloud. And the cloud, I will explain to you guys today. There's something called free tier. Free tier will allow you to run maybe 2-3 machines for a limited time for around a year, which is good. Okay. Um, yeah, but again, you can just implement almost the same stuff that we will do in the domain in the cloud, and it's like it will show you the whole circle, or I would not say it's a circle. I will say the whole cycle of identifying users, giving this user permission, and then allow this user to access certain object or certain resources. So this is really important. Okay. There's also, guys, with going with identity and access management, there is also the BAM solution, which has started to emerge these days. So BAM solution is really high because it's really kind of software that really monitor your environment when it comes to the privileged user. So this is also really common right now to see it. Why? Because the attackers also are very smart, and sometimes you really wanted to either to exploit one of the IT guys, or maybe they will exploit one user and then they will try to exploit another IT guys to have a privileged account. So this is also, guys, it's important to talk about it when we talk the identity and access management. So you really need to understand that identity access management, it's divided to 2 parts. One that it's really about provisioning new users, okay, creating your password policies, and also creating authorization or permission for these users, assign these users to rules sometimes or to group, because this is how Microsoft are doing it. It's called rule-based access control, and then gives them an access to resources. So this is what all is IAM is all about. On the other hand, if I wanted really to make sure that my privileged users are monitored and everything doesn't look suspicious, because again, why I wanted to do this, because if you guys look at this diagram over here, one of the stages that the attacker really interesting to do, okay, to escalate the privilege. And escalating the privilege means they wanted to have an admin rights. And how do you do this? You remember when we talked about DLL attacks or DLL hijacking? One of the things that they will do, they will try to inject the DLL inside a service and run this service to become a privileged user. So this is kind of things that they do. Or maybe they will try to exploit one of the privileged accounts, and then they will start to really cause havoc inside your network. So this is also something we wanted to talk about today. So this is kind of just a quick revision for what we have already covered in the last few days. It's just good to connect all these dots together. But again, today's topic is we have already covered before, but I'm just gonna cover it in a very quick way before we can go and start to look at the, I would say, I would say that I will go and quickly show you how cloud works when it comes to identity and access management. So it will give you at least the opportunity to play with the account credential and create as much you want from credential and assign password and create instance for free and the free instance, and it will not cause you, inshallah, a lot. I will say it will cause you zero money. Okay, so again, identity and access management. This is the definition. Identity and access management is we try to implement something we called it before IAAA, and IAAA is basically is standing for identification, authentication, authorization, and accountability. So this is basically the whole process of identity and access management. So you need to tell me who you are. So this is identity, okay, and then you need to prove your identity to me, and this is what we have already talked about before. To prove the identity can be proven in so many ways. Some of these ways are something you know, something you are, something you have, or even something you wear. Okay, so somewhere in the whole in the universe, and that's why sometimes some certain application will not allow you to open this application if you're traveling away because you are in a different geographical area. It's not 100% valid thing, but it can be combined with other stuff as well. Okay, and we will talk about also multi-factor authentication, how to enable multi-factor authentication in the cloud, what kind of application we can use to see multi-factor authentication really working. So this is really important. Also here, guys, in the authorization phase is all about to access management to give you the right permission. So this is where this question, what can you do? And this is very important because in security, we have a very important principle, which is the principle of the least privilege. So I wanted only to give the user the least amount of privilege they can use to do their work, okay? Never give someone extra privilege because you're going to regret it later on, okay? If you know that a developer, he only need an access read write to a database, don't give him a full read or full permission or modify permission or write permission, okay? Because if these guys are really compromised, if you can read only the database, this is mean a compromise in confidentiality. But if someone can write to the database, this is a compromise for confidentiality and integrity. So it's going to be also worse in case of compromise. So make sure that you implement the least privilege principle all the time, okay? Give them only the permission or enough permission to do their job. And we mentioned before, there is so many modules that we can use here is basically the MAC, mandatory access control, and the DAC, discretionary access control. And we also have the rule-based access control and rules-based access control. So this is the 4 access control module. And the last thing that's to enable us to implement non-repudiation and to have an audit logs is to create the accountability part, which is also important because we don't want users to really come back later and say, we didn't do this, it's not us. This is kind of things that we really need to implement in identity and access management. So this is just a quick revision. So the authentication is a process for identifying user that request access to the system or a network or devices. Access control often determine user identity according to their credential, like username and password. Other authentication technology like biometric and authentication apps are also used to authenticate user identity. So this is what it's saying, that user identity can be done using, again, using one-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. So this is also important to implement. Multi-factor authentication, guys, is right now is becoming a must. You can see this is when you go to the airport, okay? They will always stop you and ask you for your passport. This is your identity. And then they will not really, 100% sure. So they will do also, a retina scan or even hand fingerprint to make sure that you are really the person. That's, for example, yesterday I was going to the embassy in Saudi Arabia. So they asked me for the fingerprint. So this is basically not anyone that will come to Saudi Arabia, show them a passport, they allow him to get in. They will compare the fingerprint that I took in yesterday in the embassy with the fingerprint that I will do once I arrive there. So this is kind of authentication that I'm the same person who done this long time ago. So this is also something you really need to think about it when you implement security, especially guys. If we do this in a real life, to face, okay, and I can tell you are the person from your picture and everything. Okay, so we really need to do this when it comes to online resources, because online resources I have, especially if you are in the cloud or if you are in the premises, you have user connected from everywhere in the world, proclaiming they are someone, especially with the situation of COVID-19. We have a lot of the workforce working from home. So I have them working from home. They have their laptops and they are coming here, connecting to my environment, asking for emails, asking to access application. So I really cannot trust who is this person, especially with all these um, credential attacks that we are seeing right now. And someone is really compromised by his credential is being stolen in maybe because of phishing attacks or whatever. Okay, so I really wanted when someone is connecting, we need to implement MFA, which is multi-factor authentication. Okay, this is just an introduction. And again, I was watching what happened in the US recently, and they said, okay, for all the critical infrastructure, whether it's a banking or whether it's a water facility, whether it's electricity grid, whether it's a nuclear facility, we need to implement two solutions. And this is what the two solution. We need either to stop completely the remote access. So we're not gonna use any remote access at all to this facility. So no one work in a bank can work remotely. No one work in a water facility can work remotely. No one can work in a nuclear facility can work remotely. So we wanted to really stop remote worker, or we needed to really to implement very restrict multi-factor authentication, okay, in order to access these facilities. So this is kind of the things, if you are a government institution, you need to really comply with this law. So if they found out that you are allowing your user accessing remote, okay, without strict multi-factor authentication, you'll be in a lot of troubles and a lot of fines, because you are basically now violating the regulation and the laws in the US. Okay, so multi-factor authentication, I can see there is a lot of implementation will happen, inshallah, soon when it comes to multi-factor authentication, especially because the situation of the COVID and the situation of a lot of people are doing their jobs remotely. So this is kind of important. Okay, why we need authentication again? Okay, because that's a simple thing that I can tell you. I cannot trust anyone online. Okay, even if someone is saying I'm your brother online, okay, don't believe him. Okay, why? Because you need to really find out who is he or is, okay, before you really can do anything. I will just tell you an attack that's happened recently. I think it's happened also in Saudi Arabia. It used to happen in UAE a lot. So you get you get a WhatsApp message from a number, okay, and this guy who's sending you this voice message is similarly has the same exact voice of one of your friends. Okay, once you get this, he will say, you know what, Habibi, I'm this situation right now, and I need you to send me money, and here's my bank account. And it sounds exactly like someone you know. Okay, so how this is attacks is happening, because basically there is so many new softwares that can really mimic and really can have a very good, I would say, quality when it's mimic voices. So what happened is, they first of all they phishing two people at the same time, okay, and they get one of them really voice, and they try to mimic it, asking for money, and then they send it to his friend, and then his friend, he will send the money to this guy, and then he will say, okay, you asked me for money. He said, no, I never asked me. Check your phone. Oh, this is not my number. Okay, and this is started to create a lot of fuss. Why? Because the attackers are really getting smart, and there is so many tools that can deceive you, and you only can figure out about this kind of attacks when you call your friend and say, okay, did you send me a voice message right now on WhatsApp saying you need some money? Okay, so you really need to authenticate people, especially in this digitalized world. You cannot just rely on being okay, naive and say, okay, great, this is my users, they can log in anywhere. No, you need to implement really multi-factor authentication. Okay, so user authentication is a method that keep it easy for hacker to steal your fingerprints. It easy? It easy or it's not easy? Are you asking, is it easy or it's not easy? Now it's easy. Okay, this is again according to the situation. Okay, so if they can really have a hold of something you are really see, there's two ways to do this. There's a physical way, okay, and there is a digitalized way. Okay? So in digitalized way, most of the organization right now they have something called fingerprint system or maybe attendance system. So when you come in the morning, you will do a fingerprint here, and then once you logged in, I will let you, Shaza, to talk about this remote Android devices. But again, the way that's I think it can be done. Okay, so in the morning you will having here a device to do fingerprint, and there is a database here inside the organization. They call it remote access control system, and the remote access control system is usually Windows, all the Windows operating system that work with a certain application and database, and it contains all the username and the fingerprint. Don't forget, guys, end of day fingerprint will be digitalized, so it will be bunch of 100. So if someone can really, compromise this machine and have hold on these database, it's a game over, right? So he can get all the fingerprints he wants. Okay, this is the digital ways. Okay, uh, this is the digitalized way. The physical way is if someone is really wanted your fingerprint, as we seen. Okay, you leave your fingerprint everywhere. Okay, when you holding a cup, when you holding your phone, you have your all fingerprints all over the screen, all over this cup. So if someone can use like a small powder on top of these cups, they can also get your fingerprints. So this is kind of two attacks to fingerprints, and that's why sometimes retina scan is more efficient than fingerprints, because fingerprints it's easy to also to really get hold of it, especially I told you guys about digital forensics, and I was watching a few years ago about all these things, and the sometimes if you don't want really to get your fingerprint or anything, so the criminal will always have his hands in the gloves, will never who will never have his hand out of the gloves. So this is kind of things that's really easy to attack, especially the physical attacks. But again, I would agree that if we have a fingerprint, if we're not securing this access control server in an appropriate way, it's also it doesn't matter. They will get your fingerprint. So fingerprint devices has a heating sensors that can measure your finger heat. So okay, this is another thing also I really didn't know. Okay, but not all of them are like really this advanced. Maybe this is a new advanced one. So I have to make sure I don't leave my things anywhere. Exactly, Shaza. You really need to see your cups and or at least to clean it with a Kleenex before. I'm pretty sure that you guys seen a lot of movies for Mission Impossible where they can easily, detect the fingerprint. So I have to make sure. Okay, again, guys, so it's very important process, the authentication process here, because we cannot trust anyone online, and we really need to implement access management. Access management, again, I have an assets, okay, someone is trying to access this assets, whether this assets is a wireless connection, okay, so this is the network connection, or whether this asset is a file server on my environment, or whether this asset is an email server that everyone can access, or whether this my asset is an application, like a web application published online and people are trying to access it. I need to establish the access control, and access control basically is all about to identify who you are and then ask you for a verification or a proof of who you are. Okay. The basic principle of authentication is that without a proper form of identification, a system will not be able to correlate an authentication factor with a specific entry, protect and maintain the availability, confidentiality, and integrity of computer network for this person. So this is basically, it's saying that if we don't really get your proper ID and password, then your username and password will not be acceptable, and then you will be also rejected to access the system. So this is the basic principle here. Okay. So again, the authentication message, you should be very comfortable talking about it right now. It's basically is how you authenticate someone. Okay, I said that we can use something you know, but again, something you know right now is not the best way, especially if you work in a critical environment. Okay, if you work in really also an environment where it's allowing user for the internet to log into the environment, you cannot rely only to username and password. So from long time ago, we used to have a multi-factor authentication for our remote user, for our VPN users. We call them VPN because they connected over a VPN to our premises. So we wanted to make sure that the connection is secured. We implement something called VPN. I will explain VPN later on today in a bit, how the VPN works and why it's important to have a VPN. This is also in the cloud. Okay, but again, so you wanted to make sure the connection is secure over the VPN, and also you need to make sure that the users are really who they're reclaiming they are, not with the username and password, because username and password is easy to really steal. So you really need to implement something you have. So we used to give our users something like maybe a small fob or a small, they called it fob. Sometimes they called it, hardware token, and the hardware token will be showing you different numbers. Every minute, these numbers are changing, and you take this number, combine it with your username and password, and then send it to the authentication server. The authentication server will allow you to log in right after. Okay, guys? So something you are, a force types where you are. So this is also you can implement. You can always set the VPN behind the firewall. Okay, so I will explain the VPN. Don't worry, but the VPN is can be terminated on the firewall. So all the connection coming to the firewall, and the firewall will handle the VPN. Sometimes you implement something called VPN concentrator. The VPN concentrator is a basically device that can handle and deal with all the encryption and all the IPsec tunnels that has been created with a VPN. So this is a kind of different approach. I have seen both of them. I will tell you, end of day, VPN is really nice thing to implement. IPsec is something I would love to teach you guys, because really IPsec is like really cool protocol that can allow you to protect data on the IP level. So inshallah, if we got an opportunity to talk about IPsec, we'll talk about IPsec because it's really important. So here, this is our basically the authentication methods, and we can see the authentication methods important. I don't know why IPsec is not included in our program, but again, this is a good thing to teach. Okay, again, in static password is good as long as you are within the organization. Okay, but if you are connecting outside, okay, then I would not never recommend only static word password. So this is going to be the reusable password that may or may not be expired, and that's why here, guys, it is really recommended in this area with a static password to have an expiry dates. And the expiry dates means every maybe 1 month or 2 months or 3 months. Okay, you need to have the password expired. And once the password expired, then the user need to renew the password. That's why, because why we doing this? Because we don't, even if an attacker managed to really exploit one of your users, okay, one of the if one of the basically one of the attackers managed to exploit one of your users, this password will not be forever. At least it will be with the attacker for 3 months, okay, until it will ask the user to change it again. So it's already good, and we need also to implement the lockout policy. So after 3 4 times or 5 times of a wrong password, we really need to make sure that password is already after 3, 4, 5, the password would be, or the account would be logged out. So this is another thing you look at. Typically, user generated means that I will allow user to create the password. So when we creating the password today in the cloud, you will see that I can tell my user, next time you log in, I will create for you a password. I'll give him this password. But next time you log in, you really need to create your own password. Why? Because you don't want to come the user later on to say, okay, I am not the only one who knows the password. The IT also know the password. So this is another thing to make sure that the users are accountable for their password. Okay, and you really need to enforce password policy. And the password policy, as we have seen before, and we keep talking about it, is basically is to ensure the password will expire, and the password will be complex, and we have to use a different combination of different lower cases and upper cases, and also special characters in your password. Your password length also is important. When you have a small password length, later on in the ethical hacking, we'll see it's easier, and it's also require less time to exploit. So we really need password length is not less than 10 characters or 12 characters. Sometimes Microsoft recommend 14 characters. So this is kind of things that you really need to take into consideration when you create the password. Work best when you combine with another authentication type, such as a smart card or biometric controls. That's again, the multi-factor authentication comes over and over, telling you that you shouldn't really go for only one type of authentication, and you really need to implement multi-factor authentication. Okay, guys, so far so good. Any questions?
Yes, so far so good.
Okay, so if you guys allow me, let's just move on a little bit here before we start to look at the cloud lecture that I have prepared. Here's the authentication methods. And again, password authentication, I think we have already explained enough. Multi-factor authentication is a way to really implement security when it comes to access control right now. You really also need to educate users and give awareness training about how to properly use the password, the multi-factor authentication, because you don't want also someone to compromise their multi-factor authentication. There is well-known ways right now to really to compromise multi-factor authentication. Certificate-based authentication, biometric authentication, token-based authentication. This is where I send you a token to your phone or to another device, or maybe you install application in your device and it will generate a token, and I can use this token to the website. And I will show you today how to implement the multi-factor authentication, inshallah, using token-based authentication on the cloud, passwordless authentication that we can use no password. This is can't with no password on anything to allow you to get in. Certificate-based authentication means your system will have a certain certificate installed only for a specific user to log into the system. So this is also a new type of authentication. But again, if someone steal your laptop, okay, and the certificate is on top of it, and the laptop is not protected enough, he can steal this certificate and cause damage. So this is also another type of authentication that exists. Common authentication protocols, this is the protocols that we use to exchange the messages of authentication. Basically, if I wanted to authenticate a system, I wanted really to send my username and password. Okay, so if I send my username and password over a clear channel, okay, what will happen is someone will compromise this username and password. So the authentication process can be done on the server side, yes, and this is what authentication was all about. But I really need to make sure that the protocol that will carry my authentication is also a secure protocol. And if it's not secure protocol, guys, what will happen is all this what we do in access control to make sure that no one can access the system except the validated users, it will be done in vain. Like, it will not be worth it. So I really need to implement controls that will allow me to authenticate in a proper way, and it also will really encrypt and protect my identity. Okay, so this is another thing that we really need to look at. So this is like early beginning communication protocols that's or authentication protocols that exist in network. So BAB and SHAB is really two protocols, and I will explain BAB in a very quick way. Okay, Light Directory Access Protocol. This is LDAP, what we use in Windows environment and Active Directory environment. Extensible authentication protocol is what we use in wireless to ensure, I would say, to ensure more secure communication with a wireless access point. And this is أستاذ نايف session key. Token, no, token is like, I would explain to you. So token, for example, Yanaif, let's say that you are logging into your bank account, okay? And you log to the bank, this is bank, okay, .com. And this bank, guys, you decided to do the transfer, okay? So if you decided to do the transfer, they said, okay, you can transfer this money, but we're gonna send you a token to your phone, okay, because your phone is registered from day one when you registered your account number. They were gonna send you a token. Only you, okay, will be able to see this token because it will come to your SMS. You can take this token from here and add it here. And once you add the same token here, then they will allow the transfer to go. So this is the token-based access control, okay? The authentication says will receive the password from the client and then send the client token. Exactly, exactly. So this is usually what the banking are doing right now. The banking will do first of all authentication using a username and password, and then later on, if you started to do any modification in the account, whether you are withdrawing money or whether you are transferring money, they will ask you to really confirm your identity by this token. So this is a multi-factor authentication. Okay, great. So let's go again to here. So this is extensible authentication protocol. This is when you are trying to connect to a wireless access point, guys. Okay, when you are trying to connect to access point, so this is you as a computer with a wireless access device. You tried to authenticate to a wireless access point. This access point will be connected to another device like a Radius server or maybe Takasa server or maybe even an Active Directory. And when you pass the username or password, this basically a wireless access point will send the username and password to be authenticated here in the in the back end server. And if this authentication is cool, it will reply back to you to you can now authenticate to the wireless access point. So this kind of extendable access authentication protocol, this is what they use in a big corporate environment when they are trying to secure the wireless access point, because you cannot allow everyone to access with the same username and password. So we cannot create the database extensible database here for all the username and password, or maybe we can integrate it with the Active Directory domain that I told you guys about today, that it allow you to have all to manage all the users and all accounts in one centralized place. Okay. طبعا again we have SSL that's become now there is no something called SSL anymore. It's only TLS, and TLS version 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 now is becoming available. And again, these are not the authentication process. The authentication process, we talked about it before. This is the protocol that will allow you to send your authentication. So the TLS is going to be between you and the web server, okay? And the way that is done, that the web server will create a certificate, and we mentioned how to create the certificate in the PKI lesson, and we will send the certificate to the end user. The end user will use the public key in this certificate to encrypt his credential and send it back to the server. So again, we are in this common authentication protocol. We really wanted to make sure that your credential are really secured when we are communicating. Okay, so this is really is not about the communication. This is about authentication and securing your credential when it's going over the network. Okay, Kibros is another also. Kibros is very big authentication protocol that is basically developed in the MIT back in 1980s, and it's really used. There is so many versions of Kerberos for sure, from version 1 all the way to version 5 or 6 right now. Okay, and all of them right now are being used in heavily in Windows environment, especially in the domain environment. And this is how you are authenticated to a server, and this server then I'll give you a ticket, or they call it granting ticket, and this granting ticket will allow you to access another resources within the domain environment. Okay, Kerberos is very interesting. I would highly recommend, guys, if you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, to watch a video about how Kerberos works. It will teach you a lot about encryption, and it will teach you a lot about how authentication is done in Windows. And again, you do understand this authentication because there is so many attacks right now are really attacking Kerberos as an authentication method, and one of them is called the golden tickets in Kerberos that allow you to really send some malformed packets, and then you can get authentication to higher privileged users within the organization without really much effort. So you really need to understand Kerberos and how to secure Kerberos, because this is your authentication protocol within a network, and if it's not secure, will cause you a lot of troubles. Okay, I'm just gonna give you a small demo how these protocols are working, but I'm sure this is it's easy to understand. We have already covered maybe this IAM before and the TLS before in the deep details, but maybe I didn't cover these all, so I'll cover one of them and it will show you how it works. We also covered radius and the CASIS before, so it's very close. So now, this is a BAB. We call it BAB. This is standing for Password Authentication Protocol, because basically username and password. You have two routers, and they wanted to authenticate each other within the network, so they will be able to send traffic to each other, because otherwise I will not really. This is basically when we used to do this when we have a router in our premises and we wanted to communicate with the router with a service provider. How can I tell there is no router in between who's trying to really sniff the data and cause us trouble? Okay, so this is really something we really need to make sure about. So in order to really have communication between the router with the service provider, we used to implement this BAP to ensure that I'm really talking to the router from the service provider. If he failed to authenticate me, okay, or I failed to authenticate him, then this is something maliciously happening in between. So this is again why we implement authentication protocols. And as you can see, guys, here, this is the remote router. Okay, try to connect to this central office routers, and then the two-way handshake, it will send the username and password. Okay, this is the username and password, and according to the username and password that is configured in the main router, it could allow or reject this connection. If it allows a connection, this router then will be allowed to send the traffic to this centralized router over here. Okay, guys, do you understand now why we need authentication protocols? So we need the authentication methodology, and we need also the authentication protocols. So far, so good. Okay, good. Okay. So I only see few of you guys, mashallah, Shaza, Ibtisam, Mutagrid. How about the rest, guys? Are what we saying that is something hard or you don't understand? I'm just trying to really, because this topic we already talked about before. It's really not a new topic. This is kind of already have already talked about. Okay, so what access control technologies we have? We have centralized access control. We have decentralized access control, and we have single sign-on access control, which is becoming now the norm right now. So if you want to, if you go work in any organization, you will find somehow that you have a single sign-on protocol. And the idea behind the single sign-on protocol is coming from the following diagram. Okay, so before the single sign-on diagram, guys, I'll give you an example to show you how important is single sign-on. And now we have something called federated, authentication and federated accounts. And I will explain also this is in the cloud. Just give me 1 second to explain how single sign-ons looks like. So before in our corporate environment, guys, we used to have our poor user here. So this is, he started to open his machine and he started to log into the machine. So this is if he has a machine over here, okay? So he need to enter the username and password. He logged in. But within our organization, we have an HR system. We have maybe a finance systems. We have maybe a sales system. We have a CRM systems. And before the single sign-on, these guys was really need to remember or at least memorize 4 different application username and password. Okay, and you know this is like really headache. And what end up happening here that I have one user over here will write in his disk all these 4 different users and password. So this is really not a very cool approach to really handle security. This is can cause really a lot of trouble because you know anyone just passing by his desk, he can see the username and password. Also, these sticky notes they used to have in his username and password. Okay, this is can fall down in the floor, and someone from the I would say from the cleaning team or from the whatever they can take it out, put it in the basket and throw it away. Okay, and then it will fall in the wrong hands, guys, because you know there is some attacks. Inshallah, we will look at inshallah later on when we talk about ethical hacking. They called it dumpster diving. And dumpster diving maybe that means that if I wanted to really target a corporate environment, I really need to go through the dumps to look for any sticky notes of any important documents that they are throwing away. And don't underestimate this because I will tell you inshallah at that time a very well famous attacks happened because of dumpster diving. But anyway, the problem is, as I can tell you, so many username and passwords. It drives the user crazy. It drives the IT crazy because you can maintain you have 100 users, they have 400 password, username, and every time they forget one, they will come to you and saying, you know what, we have forgotten this one. Okay, we really need to get this password really, reset it or something. So it's gonna be a headache from the operational and IT operational sides. Okay, and it's also, mashallah, I like this conversation that's happening between IAM and Shaza. Okay, so what happened is it's gonna be headache for the operational side, and it's also gonna be also headache from the user remember side. So what they said, okay, we're not. Let's have a centralized location where the user will sign on one time, and this sign on one time will be integrated with all these applications. So once he signed on, okay, he will get enough permission to be authenticated to all this application within our environment. And that is exactly what a sign on is all about. We're trying to really minimize the amount of time and amount of username and password and amount of operation to maintain all these passwords and all these things, and also to be more secure. Okay, but again, guys, there is also a drawback of single sign-on. That means if the user loses his single sign-on user name and password, that means you are not compromising this machine only, you compromise all his permission on all these machine and application on this as well. So really, the single sign-on makes our life from the IT perspective, from operation perspective, is very easy because you implemented one and you forget about it. Okay, and you have an access to all your application, everything is set for you. But in the same times, from the security perspective, it's going to be also really bad if you lose this username and password, because this is will allow them to a lot of access to a lot of application within the organization. So this is kind of the access control methodology. It is we start to look at synchronous and asynchronous authentication and how it looks like and how to use a smart card to log here. And then we'll start to look at access control methods, discretionary access control, mandatory access control, and non-discretionary access control, which is rule-based access control. So this is kind of things that we have already covered before. So I'm not gonna go again and explain the same topics again because I don't want to be boring here today. So what I will do right now is I will save this lecture because I wanted to share it with you. It's like a couple of slides that you maybe need to read. And then I will jump to this specific lecture about cloud security and how to implement the IAM in cloud security. But I think it's a good time to take a quick break, right? Before we really started to look at the cloud, I wanted you guys to go and get like some proper, uh, tea and a proper also karak, if you allow me. Yes, it's a tea time, Nasiba, as I will. It's okay. I think it's a good about time 1 hour and a half because it's gonna be also boring if we keep talking for 2 3 hours. So let's just go ahead and go get coffee, tea. I would say Nescafe, whatever, make it for you. Okay, we'll give it 15 minutes. Uh, um, Go for 15 minutes break. So it's now 10:25. Okay, so 10:25, and then we'll come back 10:40 according to Abir as well. Okay, so we come back in 15 minutes, guys. Okay, enjoy your break, and see you in a bit, inshallah. Go and look at this is the kind of certificates that I'm gonna try to cover with you, aside with what we are explaining this week and next week. This is like kind of certificates. They called it AWS architect, and the architect is the person who is building the cloud solutions. So he really knows a little bit about security. He really needs a little bit about how to create server. He needs a little bit about the databases. So we're gonna talk about all this area, but the focus today is basically about the identity and access management because this is really important. And this is again, your service now is gonna be online, so it's gonna be public in the cloud. So you really need to how to protect these service from someone to access it, okay? Because it's already public for everyone. So the most important thing that we'll be covering today is basically two things. If we have the time, we'll talk about the identity and access management. This is a specific topic, and we'll talk about something called virtual private cloud. This is how you create your own data center in the cloud. So you create your network, different network. You connect this different network to the internet. Okay, can you allow these two different networks to talk to each other or no? Okay, do you want them to connect to the external world or no? So this is kind of what we will talk about. We will talk about two different areas. So the first area is called identity and access management. The second area that we will talk about, okay, is basically is something called virtual private cloud. And this is how you create your own data center. And this is how what you can go talk for example, if you don't have a data center on premises, now you will have a data centers published on the cloud. Okay, so this is the topic for today. Okay, so let's go ahead and go quickly. In order to be really an architect and go for the exam in the architect, this is our very simple steps. We'll try to cover as much as we can. If we got the time to do it all, that's fine. If we don't, also that's fine. I'm just giving you an opportunity to have your own lab published in the cloud. So if you have any issues in your computer of not how if you don't have enough resources in your computer how to do labs, you can do it on the cloud. Okay, so it requires from us 2 to 3 hours a day. This is to study and learn about things and practice stuff. So this is, I would say, it's not too much, especially if we are really mashallah full-time students right now. So this is the 3 hours, but you will by the end of this section you will build something really cool, okay, which is really a big data center. So the idea here, guys, by end of this section, not today, okay, is we're gonna build something like this, okay, and building something like this is really complicated web application and web server and the databases and so many services that runs in the cloud, and we really need to implement all these kind of connection and controls and identity and access management. in order to do something really complicated. This is sometimes you can ask even Sumi about it when you guys have Sumi sometimes in the session. He runs, he work a part-time with a fintech company, and they have an implementation something like this. So by end of this course, we should be able to implement uh, some network like this. Okay. So and this is all will be running on the cloud. And again, I will try to make sure that you will not pay anything to AWS or Amazon. You will get it inshallah for free. Okay, guys. So this is gonna be also the lecture. I will give it to you. Also, we will do also I would say quick quiz. Or if not quick quiz, we will give you a small diagram to implement it by end of this section. So this is gonna be like an extra lab or optional lab. So this is will be fun to do. So يعني how to create users, how to create groups. So this is kind of thing is that and easy. It's easy, alhamdulillah. Okay. So just to tell you, inshallah, when you go to work right after this course, inshallah, when you get a job, inshallah, you will find something called multi-cloud. That means that when you go and work for an organization, sometimes you will feel that they will not only using one cloud service, they are using multiple cloud service. So they are using Amazon maybe for their web server, they're using Microsoft Azure for the Office 365, they are using IBM Cloud to do another analytics thing. So what we have seen right now, okay, that's really what is being emerged in the market right now, that the company, they have their own premises network, they have different cloud provider, and from each different cloud provider, they have a different service they run on top of this provider. So it's really recommended that also you really protect these communication and these networks, because it's end of day, it's a connection to your network. I mean, we see how if the cloud is being compromised, this is how can it also impact you. Okay, guys, so this is what we say here. Organization will continue to use multiple cloud provider for different use cases according to their needs. Okay, so this is, I hope this is clear. Okay, also what kind of service we are acquiring from the cloud, and what kind of responsibilities that fall into us when it's come to security. That is what we call it the shared responsibilities. And we said that in a different session, I think that we have talked about there is 3 different type of cloud solution. There's something called SaaS, BaaS, and IaaS, which is basically infrastructure as a service. So here, okay, if you guys see, this is on premises. You are responsible for network, storage, hardware, virtualization, and then the operating system, the middleware, the runtime, data, and application. So are you responsible for everything from scratch all the way to the top? And you are also responsible for security. So this is basically, you are responsible for everything. But if we go for infrastructure as a service, you can see that this is a shared responsibilities model where the service provider guys are taking care of this stuff, which is network, storage, hardware, virtualization, okay? And you really need to take care of which operating system, okay, which middleware are you gonna using on top of this server, a web application, or maybe, mail server, or maybe a database server, whatever DNS server you can name it, okay? And then the runtime, and then the data and application that runs, okay? So this is all yours, okay, to take care of, and the responsibilities here is gonna fall into the service provider. If we go for a platform as a service, okay, they said, don't worry, we will give you everything, and you really need to develop your application. So they will give you an, for example, an environment that it will allow you to develop your own Python, or maybe own Node X, Node JS, or maybe JavaScript platform, okay, or maybe Java platform, and you just need the data and need the application. So this is best. So this is even better, because you don't really need to care about, the word operating system and the database and all the stuff. It's gonna be all given to you. Okay, so this is another model which is already exists in the cloud. And then you have the software as a service, where you don't really get involved in anything. They just give you an application and they give you username and password and say you access this application. This is going to be running in the cloud. You don't really need to do anything. So only data is going to be saved here. And that means that you really need to make sure that your data is really secure by choosing a good, proper cloud service provider. Okay, so what we're gonna look at today in AWS, and why I used AWS, because AWS is gaining a lot of momentum here in the Middle East, especially they just opened a new region in UAE, and I think they are planning to open a region in Saudi Arabia. When, I'm not quite sure, but they built two regions right now in the Middle East. They built one in Bahrain, and they just opened a new region just maybe a few days ago in UAE. So we have two regions now for AWS, and I can see that the AWS is really well organized, and it allows us to have a free tier, so we can just play around without paying money. So this is an important thing. So we'll be talking about AWS global infrastructure, how they plan their infrastructure, okay, how they install their data center, because end of day, you know, this old virtualization thing and all this nice cloud is running really on hardware. So where is the hardware is running? Okay, so this is the first question. Second question, in each location of these region, guys, okay, how many availability zones? I will explain that's what is availability zone and how many data centers they have in each region. So this is going to be also something you really need to learn about it, because end of day you want to make your application is available in multiple zones. So if one of these zones is down for whatever reason, you will have your application running in another zone. So this is another thing that we really need to look at, and this is a good measurement for having a very high available application. So if you have a web server, you can just split it between so many availability zones. So if one of these availability zones have an issue, you can be doing okay. Okay, then we will look at the website itself, and I will explain to you how to create your first account and all this stuff. It's easy peasy. Okay, here identity and access management. This is the first thing they teach you about in Azure, or even Microsoft, on Google AWS, or even in Google Cloud or IBM Cloud, or you name it. They teach you about the identity access management because they wanted to make sure no one can access your resources. Okay, because if someone access your resources here, if someone can compromise your username and password and access these resources, it can really cause a lot of damage. Okay, because basically he can do whatever he wants. Okay, here we will talk about VPCs. This is where you can create your own data center and divide this data center from network perspective on the cloud. So VPC is stand for virtual private cloud. And we'll talk about what is the difference between public cloud and private cloud, why we need sometimes to have public cloud that's connected to the internet and everyone can see the resources, and why sometimes we have a private cloud that we don't want anyone to interact with. And this is a kind of similar thing that we talked about when we were talked about firewalls, that we really need to create boundaries. We have the external world, which is we cannot trust, and we have our internal networks, which we can trust. So this is the same concept, public private network and public and private subnets or VPC. Okay, guys? And then we will talk about hyper connectivity options. Means right now you have some instance or some server running in the cloud, and you have your own data centers. Okay, if you have your own data centers and you have their public here, okay, how can we connect between both of them? So this is what we call the hyper connectivity. And how can we assure this connectivity is secure, okay, and no one can really look into what is the data is being sent by these servers and these servers on premises. On premises means inside my company, basically. Okay, guys, so far so good. Any questions? Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the infrastructure. So the infrastructure, as you can see, this is like a quick map, okay, for an infrastructure of AWS. These blue points over there, okay, it means that AWS, they have a huge data center, or they have a presence in this area in the world. So they have a presence in California, they have a presence in West Virginia, They have presence in Bahrain, as I mentioned here. This is the point of Bahrain. They have presence right now very close to Saudi Arabia and UAE. Okay, so this is a new presence. Okay, so they code these guys. They coded this is regions. Okay, so this is the regions. The point here in this graph where it is really red, that means it's coming soon. So it's coming soon mean what? They are really building their infrastructure in this area. Okay, I'm not quite sure where it is. This is maybe in very close. Maybe this is in Greece or something, because this is no, this is not Greece. The Greece is one over here. I'm not quite sure where is it exactly in the map. I will not really break my head because I don't want. I don't know which exactly it's coming soon. But again, we have seen where is AWS present. Okay, then we have something called availability zones. What we mean by availability zones, in each one of these region, guys, they have multiple data centers. Why do they have multiple data centers? They have multiple data centers because they worried that if one of these data centers are down, okay, the other data centers were, sorry, the whole region would be down. That's why they created something called availability zone. If I talk you to a magnifying to one zone, guys, so one region here consists of 3 data centers, okay? And each data center, they called it availability zone, okay? And all of them are connected to each other by a very high-speed fiber, so they are all acting as one, okay? But why I created this in my region here? Because I'm worried that if someone really hit this thing in a really bad way, okay, I will lose all my availability zone. So no, I will create multiple data centers here and connect all of them together. And I can say, you know what, you will have your own server here and you have another copy of your server here, okay? And if something really hit this availability zone, it's okay. Your server is still working from another availability zone over here. And don't worry about replication. If you wanted to make sure that they are replicating and sending data to each other, don't worry about this because we can connect between both of this data center by a fiber optic. So it's really give you a really good speed and low latency. There is no much latency between sending the data. Okay, guys? And then again, it's saying it's up to 100 kilometers. So between, this is in the same region. Okay, so let's say this is, for example, West Virginia 1. So we have West Virginia A as the availability zone number A. We have West Virginia B, which is another availability zone. We have West Virginia C. So this is 3 different data center in one location, which is West Virginia. Okay. The whole idea is I'm worried about we have a cut in power supply here. It's okay. Even if the whole thing is down here, I can have still B and C running. Okay. So this is to give you more availability and really redundant power supply, redundant availability for your server and instance. Okay. So this is what we mean by one region and multiple availability zone. And if you can, we go back again to this same thing we have just discovered here, you can see we have around 24 geographical regions, but in the same times we have around 76. So in every one region, there is at least 2 availability zone or 3 availability zones. Okay, guys? So now it's saying US Central 1B and B or Europe A. So they call this region when you create the instance. Yes, when you create your instance in the first time, you need to specify which region, which availability zone you wanted this incident to run on top of it. Okay, so this is I will show you when we create an instance in a bit. But again, everyone understand? 3 upcoming zones, 9 additional availability zones are coming. You know, 245 countries or territories that they're working at. So this is basically they cover everywhere in the globe. Basically, this is what it is. Yani we have only in South Africa here in Africa only 1 zone. Hopefully Egypt or maybe Tunisia or maybe Algeria they will get 1 soon as well. So we'll get also AWS. Okay, again, What I wanted you guys to know, that's the good thing that will allow us to work today on this assignments is the AWS. They offer you something called free tier, and free tier is basically they will say, you know what, don't come and pay for our service right away. You can come use our service for 1 year, and then after 1 year, hello, can you guys put me in the mute, please? Yeah, please. Who's this cute kid?
Luli.
Yeah, Nori. Okay, I don't know who is this basically. Okay, so we are in the mute again. So the AWS is saying don't. It's okay, Sam. So it's again. So AWS guys doesn't really tell you come and pay for it right away. It's giving you a free tier where you can run 1 or 2 instances and do all the configuration and feed. That is exactly what you want. And then after 1 year, they will start to charge you. So this is like account for free for 1 year. Yes, another thing that Naif is mentioned, and it's true. Okay, and I will tell you, Naif, how to tackle this. Okay, so Naif saying that we really need to put your credit card. You really need to put your credit card, and that's why you really need to be careful. How to be careful? I will tell you what. So you will use your credit card. They will discount the first time you will activate your account. They will discount $1, and then they will refund it back. Okay, and then they will give you the free tier, and I will show you how to use the free tier for free. Okay, and how to do all this configuration for free. Okay, but you can still do an alert in your billing. If you're for example, your bill is more than $5, it can send you an alert. But again, if you made sure that you close all the instance, you close all the things that we do in the lab after you finish, you will not be getting charged for one even real. Okay, so this is gonna be like a free lab to work on it day and night, but to make sure that after you finish working and playing, just to switch it off. If you wanted to see how the free tier guys looks like, I have the free tier here open somewhere. Let me see if I can get this. Okay, straight. Okay. I will just show you the free tier guys from AWS, the free tier AWS. Okay, so if you guys can see this one over here. So that's a free tier AWS. It will show you all the services that you can get. And one of these services is Amazon EC2. You can open an EC2 instance for almost 750 hours a month. Do you know what that means? That means if we have 30 days and we have 24 hours a day, that means it's going to be around 710. So you can run an instance almost all the time for free on AWS. Okay, and there is so many things that you can really have here for free. You can have S3 bucket. The S3 bucket is basically a database for object files database. You can save files on it. Okay, and you have up to 5 GB for free. You can have also rational database for 750 hours for free. That's per month. That means almost this database is going to be working all the months for free. So you can create a web server that is run all the months, okay, connected to the database, okay, and they are running all the months for free on AWS environment, okay. You have also, for example, today I was looking at WAF because I wanted you guys to really have the feeling of WAF. WAF is Web Application Firewall, and it's really common that they have a free WAF also as well here. It allow you up to 10 million also incidents. You remember when I told you about the event per second and all the stuff? So we have up till in this WAF up to 10 million records per month. So it's really nice to implement the WAF and see how WAF is working. So we can do also WAF here. So you can implement your web application, and then you can implement your database, and then you can add a WAF on top of your web application. If you wanted really to create very high available thing, like high available server, you can use the load balancing. So if you can see, there is something called load balancing. It's up to 750 hours per month. That means you will have a load balancing that is load between two instance or three servers at the same time without any paying anything. So you can create your own environment here or your web server basically for free in the early beginning. So this is basically the tier one free tier. And again, when you create any server, it will tell you if you have to pay for money for it or if it's free tier. And I will show you the difference between them. Okay, guys, this is the dashboard after you finish. So this is my account. This is basically a root account. I will explain what is a root account means in AWS and why it's not recommended to use the root account all the time. So I create this account and then I created another account, which is the admin account. But again, the good thing about the AWS, guys, if you wanted just to go back, I will not look at the identity access management. I will go look at the dashboard. It can tell you, look, you are using the root account and we recommend multi-factor authentication to the root. So anything that you do that they say that it's going against their standard and guidelines, you will basically we give you a red here, and it will give you right away a way to implement the multi-factor authentication for your root account. Why, guys? Because the root account is where you're getting the billing, okay? And what is when you are getting an ultimate access to the server, to AWS. So they recommend that you protect your root account with multi-factor authentication. And this multi-factor authentication, I will show you how to implement it in a bit. But again, if I wanted to really to create another instance or to look at the identity and access bar, I can just go here in the top of this one, in the top of the search bar in the dashboard and say identity access management, and it will show me all the tools that I can use to create an identity and access management. So I have users, rules, I have policies, and I have also user groups. So usually we create a group, we add user to this group, and we give permission to access my AWS. Okay, or I create rules, and I will explain that rules here a little bit different than the rules we learn in identity and access management, because rules here, when I have, for example, a server, I wanted this server to access a database or something, I need to really give an access permission for this instance to the database. So the rules are being used differently here. We will explain what is rules in time, but this is just once you created the account, okay, you will have this basically nice diagram. And if you really wanted really to look at the identity access management, you just really need to write here IAM, and you can see the first thing over here is IAM. What is IAM can allow us to do? It can allow you to create groups. So I can create groups. I created a group called dev admin. Okay, it allow you to create users. So you can create user. I have created 2 users here. Okay, it can allow you to create rules. So you can create your own rules here. Okay, you can create policies, and the policies basically is a set of permission. This is what Naif was saying before. This permission is going to allow you to do certain stuff when it comes to the dashboard over here. So if you will look at one of these rules or the policies, it's basically a permission file, and this permission file will tell you what kind of permission you will have, and these permissions are written in JSON file. So if you read this permission, you can understand what is this permission is doing exactly. Okay, and you can do some accounts. So we talked about identity. We're creating a user. So this is identity and authentication. We'll talk about how can we create authentication in cloud, and how can we provide these users with a username and password or something called access key to log in to the accounts. Okay. We also have some here tools to really analyze the activity of the access for these accounts. And we have finally something called credential report, which is holding the accountability. So it can download this and will show you which account is being created and which date, okay, how long this account has been activated, and you know if they have multi-factor authentication or no. So this is kind of also with holding someone accountable. So this is just, you know, after you really register. So I would highly recommend that you guys tonight, you have some times, or maybe afternoon when you come back from the break, if you have some time, register in AWS, and we'll look at different things to do today. Okay, so this is basically, I explained the free tier. I hope everyone understand what is the free tier, and this is how much. Okay, another thing, guys, that you really need to understand, all the IAM, it will not cost you a penny. It will not, if you create 100 user, if you create 100 groups, if you create different rules, this is will not cost you anything. What will cost you if we start you really run these servers, the instance here, EC2. If you run so many instances, okay, and you didn't shut it down or you didn't get rid of it, it will start cause charges. That's why I'm in my labs, I only have one instance running, okay, which is because I have 750. So even if we have a month of 31 days, I will never exceed this 750, okay. And I have a database running in the background, and I always playing with both of them, and I create the whole diagram playing with both of them. So this is enough for me, okay. And after I finish the session, or after I finish the lab, I can just switch it off, and this is we're gonna save even more. If there is no money, but anyway, I will switch it off because I don't really need it, okay. So this is that's something that's the always telling you about the root account, the one I just showed you guys. That the recommendation from AWS is to use this root, okay, to access this root, to add multi-factor authentication for this root, okay, and also to create an admin account that you're gonna use it later from a different browser to log into your instance and manage your instance and manage your stuff. So a root account is basically used in the first time, and then also the root account have a privilege over the billing. So from time to time, if you are the root user, you need to go and check the billing, and that's why I told you there is a threshold in the billing. If you got anything above $5, you can send an alert for yourself. This is if you are using multiple instances. But again, we're not gonna use this, so we are not worried about it. But I will show it to you anyway. Okay, guys. So far, so good. Okay. So what is IAM? What is IAM in a very nutshell? That's the same thing that we cover in the morning. You really need to create identity, okay, an identity, and then you need to authenticate them. And then after authenticate them, you need to have a permission for them. So we'll look at the permission. We'll look at something called different permission for each user, or you wanted to really follow a policy that exists already in AWS. So the policy basically is a set of permission that we can assign to users. So we can say, you know, this user allowed to do everything. This is the administrator. This user can only allow to reach and list all the ECT incidents. So this is a permission that exists. Okay, this user is allowed to deal with S3 bucket, which is, we said that it's some sort of containers for files and objects. Okay, so we can assign him to this. So the recommendation for AWS, guys, is basically to use policies that's already created by AWS, or if you really wanted a special edition of policy, you can create your own, okay? But their methodology, right permission can be given by PAM, like privileged access management, right? That's what you mean? Okay, so Shaza is saying that we have, but don't forget the PAM is also for the privileged users account. I'm just talking here about just generally about any account, guys. And once you create the user and you did the authentication, how he will authenticate? Because by the way, guys, AWS will allow you to do different type of authentication, and actually 4 type of authentication. Yes, BAM is part of its IAM, right? Okay, and then we do the authorization, and then we have AWS account up and running. Okay, so I will give you a quick demo how to create a user right now. But again, what is the IAM features are giving us? Basically, it gives you multiple stuff, which is especially in the cloud. One of the things that I really like it about this AWS, it allow you to multi-factor authentication, okay, and it allow you to secure access to AWS resources for applications that run on AWS. So this is kind of things that's really important that we didn't have the chance to practice in the lab here. So we get all of these guys are for free when we do in IAM. Okay. Also, identity federations. This is something I have explained to you before, but maybe it's time to explain it one more time. Identity federation, that means I can allow people who authenticated in Google or Facebook or maybe another well-known organization like Microsoft to come and access my resources, because I will have some sort of protocol that can allow me to authenticate between different entities. It's called SAML and all this stuff. So again, identity federation is a good option. This is also some features of here. Okay, I identify information logs for audit and compliance purpose. Mean what? Means that I can have logs for everyone that I create and what these guys are doing. So this is the analyzer I just showed you guys. We are BCI compliance, means AWS okay, is following the best practice from BCI DSS as a standard for banking. So don't, if you are using AWS, that means you are following the best practice also for BCI. So this is a good thing as well, integrated with many AWS service, eventually consistent so that we can use it all the time. Free to use, we are not paying anything even for the multi-factor authentication. AWS STS, this is something called temporary access. And we'll talk about temporary access later on. This is especially if you work with the contractors and you wanted to give him a temp access to your network. Okay, so how can we implement this? First of all, we need to create a principle, and the principle can be a users, okay, or a rule. We'll talk about rule. Okay, and as I mentioned, rule can be only created if you wanted, for example, a service to access another service within AWS. I'm not going to talk about what service and how they access because we didn't have a lot of terminology yet. I'm really focusing right now, guys, on users. I wanted to create a user. Okay, I wanted to really generate a new user and give him a permission and let him to access some stuff. Okay, so first of all, we have something called principal. Okay, and then we'll do the authentication. This is when we create for the user username and password, or maybe something called access key, and I'll explain what is the difference. And once he's created, and I created the authentication, I need to give him the authorization. And this authorization can be done in two ways. It's either I will assign him a policy. So AWS have so many policies. I will show you how this policy looks like and what kind of permission it gives. Or I can create custom policy for these users. I can say this user is allowed to see this instance specifically, this thing, or S3 or whatever. So I can create my own. So now I created both of them. The last time, guys, actions mean it will allow him to access certain resources within the environment. Okay, so without further ado, let's go and jump to the AWS mini screen. So we'll go here. Okay, the first time for sure, guys, once you have the root account up and running, you need to create at least a user which is admin. Okay, because this is the admin that you're gonna use later on. So I'm gonna go here again. You will be in a different screen, which is the main screen over here. This is the main screen. Sorry, just go to the dashboard. Okay, so this is the dashboard, guys. And once in the dashboard, if I wanted to create another user, I will just run IAM. I will write here in the dashboard over here, IAM, Identity and Access Management, and hit enter. Okay, when I hit enter, I'll get the first one over here, which is basically users. This is when you create a user, and again, it will show you. I'm sorry, I don't know why my computer is acting a little bit slow. It happens, okay, especially with all this talking. So you can see here like a quick graph for how many users I have already, how many groups I have, how many rules I have, and if we have certain policies that we created, and certain identity provider, if I added an identity provider, and the identity provider is part of what we said, federated users. I have not created any federated user yet, but I will create a normal user first to show you how to do. So here, guys, I'm gonna log into the users. I'm gonna say that's here is my user that I have already. Okay, so this is users that's and when is exactly the password created and all the stuff. If I wanted to create a new user, I would say here add the user. Okay, and add a user, as you can tell, it will tell me the name of the user and the permission and how he will access. So over here, I will say this user, I will call him Shadi. One, I already have Shadi. So that's why he was complaining that I have already a user called Shadi. Okay. And then over here, guys, I can really allow him how he will access the, um, the AWS. So that one of the things, if you wanted to access the way I'm accessing the dashboard over here and AWS dashboard, I can say, this user is going to access the management console using a password, and you can really create a custom password, or you can create auto-generated password. Okay, so this is the normal way. Okay, how about we have a really advanced user who is a developer and he really good in Linux, and he's gonna really deal with AWS to maybe develop or to create instance or whatever. And this case, guys, I can add to him something called access keys. Okay, access keys is basically is two pair of keys, use like something like username and password. I will show you how it looks like. Okay, the user will have it downloaded in his computer, and once it's downloaded, he will add this username and password to the command line, and then now he will be able to access the AWS using the command line, like here. Okay, now in my command line, I have installed a small application. I added in this small application my AWS username and password, and now I'm really browsing into my AWS using this kind of a command line. Okay, all I need to do is saying AWS. Okay, and then okay, sorry, version. Okay, it will give me all the kind of all kind of commands, and I can run from my command line. So this is specifically made for people he can manage AWS, or who will log into AWS using the command line. We have also here, it's saying that if you wanted to access also AWS using SDK, you can use this access key. SDK, guys, is a stand for Software Development Kit. If you are developing using maybe a kit for Python, or maybe a kit for Java, and you wanted really your kit to be really connected to AWS account, and then you can provision an instance and develop or deploy this application to your instance right away. You can also add this access key to it, or even APIs. So sometimes we use API programming interface. Okay, and this is between application and application. We'll talk about it later on when we need it. But again, guys, I can create here a password also. I would highly recommend in the early beginning, because this is the first time you create this. You need to create an auto-generated password, because this is really a strong password. Okay, and you really need to force the user to change this password, because they cannot reclaim later on that the IT already knows a password. So you can ask the users the first time by checking this account, by checking this box, that they will require to change the password. So this is a good practice. So I will not do it because I'm just giving you a demonstration. Here you can create also a very simple password over here just for demonstration or to access. Okay, and then I will say going next to permission. As you can see, I have the user created, and then I'm going to the permission. According to what? According to this module that I'm using here, guys. First, you create the user, okay, and specify what authentication that we need for this user, whether this user we're gonna use the access key, the one that I showed about the command line and SDK and APIs, or one with a password. and then next right after is the permission is here, the permission over here, can you guys can see. So you can see here, okay, it's saying add user to a group. Okay, you can create a group, okay, and then give this group permission, okay, or you can add users to one of the groups that already exist here, okay. So I already created two groups, admin and dev, before. So I'm gonna say, okay, you know what, I'm gonna create a new group. Okay, so I wanted this user, okay, to be a part of a group. Again, guys, remember, and when we talked about users and a group and access control, when we talked about it, I said in role access control, it's good to have all your users are part of one group, okay? And then assign a permission to this group, okay, guys? So this is really a good approach. And this is what they use in Windows and so many operating systems. So I can create a group, add this all user to this group, and then give this group a certain permission. So I'm gonna create a new group just to show you guys, because I already created before group. So I'm gonna create a new group. I will say I will create a new group. I will say I will call this group help desk. So this is gonna be our help nice desk that's we're gonna add me. Okay, and here guys, what kind of permission? Okay, so help desk is really help desk. Okay, so here guys is basically all the permission that exist in AWS, guys. Okay, and the recommendation is you can create your own permission, or you can use one of the permission that exist already. They work in the same department. Yes, exactly, Ustaz Ashaz. If they work in the same department, that is will be more beneficial to have them in the same group. So over here, guys, there's so many. I can say, okay, you know what? I wanted these guys to only to look at the EC2 instance. So I will filter by EC2 instance. And you can see there is so many EC2 instance permission. Okay, so I will say, okay, over here, I will use this permission, and I will show you later on what permission I have chosen. Okay, sorry, I have not created. Okay, again, sorry. Help desk. Okay, and then I will come here. I will say that EC2. I know this is the thing here over here, EC2 and S3 and all this stuff is the new maybe terminology for you guys, but I will explain what is the difference between EC2 and S3. But in a very simple way, EC2 is basically the basic kind of servers that exist in AWS. So this is a server where you can choose a certain operating system and install. So the group must be based on rules. Yes, over here. Okay, so and then we will say, next. Now you can see that the help desk has been created. Okay, here, and there's a checkbox already. And now you can create tags, and tags means it's just a new, some sort of identification for these users, or some extra information about this user. So I can say this is help desk. Okay, I will write it down here, and I was saying the optional here. This is IT help desk. Okay, so because sometimes we have multiple help desk in the organization, and I will hit enter over here, guys. Okay, and as you can see, this is like basically a quick review for what have you created while you are creating this user. It's basically saying that the user, his name, okay, you give him a programmatic access, and at the same times you give him management access. The management access is the one through the web, the GUI, and the programmatic access, the one with command line. Okay, the password would be auto-generated. I didn't specify a password. Okay, require password reset. I had no, but usually you should have already created yes. Okay, and then the permission boundary is not set. We'll talk about permission boundary later on, but you can come here and see that's over here. Okay, guys, over here, if you can see, he is part of group permission summary. He's part of group. called help desk. If you hit help desk, guys, here, okay, it will take me to what permission is assigned to the group called help desk, and I can see it. I'm sorry about being a little bit late in this. I don't know why it's taking some times, but you can see this is my group that I called help desk. If I browse to permission over here, I can see the whole permission that I give to my user here on Chadi1. If I open this thing, guys, I can see what permission is being giving now to this specific user. It's all written in JSON here. And I'm sorry about the color, but I'm sure that when you do it at your environment, you can read the permission, and basically the permission is telling you what you do. Okay, guys, so this is the group, this is the permission, and again, this is the keys. This is the keys here. Over here, it's saying that is keys again is an extra information. They said that this is IT help desk, and again, lastly, I can just hit enter. Okay, and when I hit enter and create the user, it will give me an option to send the user an email to basically to tell him that I created for him an account. Okay, and that there is an important thing, guys, right here. Okay, so I can send him the email with the secret access key and the password. Okay, and in order for the user to access the console or to access the same thing I see right now, the GUI, I can send him this link. Okay, so here I can send it to my email. This basically in an email and specify an email to send him the password. Okay, so I will go to my over here saying hello. I'm gonna send you this password, log into Amazon using this, and it's showing the password. Your password will be provided in AWS account. Okay, and then I will specify my email and hit enter. It's gonna send the user the account and the link to log in to this account. Okay, guys. So this is basically the whole provisioning and giving a permission to an account in AWS. So I create the user, I assign the permission, and then once I assign the permission, I add him to a group. And then once I add the group, I add tags, and finally I can send him something. Okay, last thing I wanted to really to tell you guys here is basically the secret access key here, this one, okay, and the access key. Look, guys, these access keys, okay, once I say close here, I will not be able to see it again, okay? So if I wanted really to copy it, okay, I can copy it from here, okay? Otherwise, I will not be able to. Okay, so what if I forget this access key or I lost it or I deleted? You can really create another access key, but not the same access key. So you really need to be very careful when you handle the access key, the one that I said programmatic one, okay? If I wanted, and the access key, you guys can see, the access key is like same like a username and password. It's called access key ID and secret access key. So I have a username and password, okay? And both of them, the first time you access the console using the CMD, you need to provide it. Once you provide it once, it's all khalas in your system, and you can run AWS from your command line, and you don't worry about it, okay? Only when I will use this access key, what if I have lost this laptop? Or what something like damage my laptop like a water or something? I really need my access key again. And unfortunately, if you don't protect your access key, or if it's gone your laptop, you will not be able to access the same account again. So you really need to create the access key again. So it's very good approach to protect this access key. Okay, guys, once you finish this, you close. When you close, okay, let me see if it's saying something. Okay, it's really closing. I'm sure, I'm sorry about the late again. I don't know why it's behaving like this, but it's seeing that your user has been already activated, guys. And this is, and this is my first user, okay? My second user that I created, this is the user I have already created, Shadi1, okay, guys? And then if you come to policies, okay, you can see all the policies in AWS, okay, and you can really start to expand these policies and see what is this policy is all about. Some of these policies can allow you to be a complete admin on this server. Some is no, okay. And another thing that I wanted to show you, user groups that we have created. I have created a help desk over here, and I have before created dev and admin groups. So I'm creating all the IT groups that I need and under the user groups, okay? And you can assign to each group another different permission. And once I add a user and to this group, you can find this group. So you have here one group, and there's only one user assigned to this group, and you can see the permission of this group over here, guys. Okay, so far so good. Okay,
Yes, Mr.
so okay, perfect. So we can see that we have done the whole operation here. So, and this is basically some screenshot for what we have done here, the summary of users, what kind of policy is there and the policy, what it entails here. For example, this policy here and over here is saying that you will allow user access to everything because the asterisk here means everything. So this is kind of the admin groups. So if you allow your user to access everything and do everything, that's basically you creating an admin users, okay? And then finally here, guys, this is the summary. When you create a users, you can really finish and you can see that the user is being created. We talked about the credentials, and we talked about accounts. This is where is it? This is this is SSH keys and AWS. We talked about the keys already and the secret keys. And here, okay, so account setting, guys. What if I wanted? Okay, like that we are not applying the list privilege. Yes, that's why I'm saying your AM. Okay, you don't give all the users admin. Okay, only admin will have the admin rights to create instance, to delete instance, to do all what he did, right? So this is the admin. We understand that there is an admin there. He will be very careful with his action. Okay, but other user, help desk user. Help desk user, maybe they are needed to access one of the instances to install updates, or maybe they are there to really troubleshooting an issue with an instance. That's why I went to really, this is rule-based access control, Yamaha. So the group, guys, over here, that is what I was trying to say. This group over here will have all my users that work in the help desk team. And then in the same time, when I click the help desk team, there are permission, okay, which is really related to EC2, is assigned to them. So this is what we were talking about. This is basically I have. Let me explain it here one more time. I have a group, okay, and this group are giving the permission to handle EC2 only. Okay, so they have permission here. And in the same times, every time I have a new user who work in a work desk in a help desk, I can just assign him to this group. So this is a rule-based access control. Okay, is it clear now? Okay, perfect. So one thing also I mentioned that access identity access management is all about, guys, to really have a strong policy when it handles the password and all the stuff. So how to create a very strong password policy for all the users? Okay, so you can just go to here. There is something called account settings. You click account setting over here, guys. It will show you all the account setting details, including the password that you can specify and how you can create really strong password for the user. Okay, so here, guys, if we scroll down here, okay, so we can go to global endpoints. Okay, so you can see here the minimum password length is 8. Okay, and this is something you really wanted to change. So you hit change, guys, and you can see over here that I have different, basically different criteria here for the password. I can make the password enforce minimum length, so you can just create it 10. Okay, I wanted all my accounts to have 10 characters. Require at least one upper character. Require one at least lower characters. You require at least one number. So here is also you require special characters. You enforce uh, password expiration. If you hit this one, guys, it will show you an option for when exactly your password will expire. It's highly recommend that you make it 60 days or 30 days according to the policy within the organization. Password expiration requires administration reset. That's mean every time the password required, the user will not be able to reset his password. Okay, he really need to go to the administrator. So if you wanted really this to happen, you can click this one. If you wanted him to be able to renew his password, you can really leave it without clicking. Allow user to change his own password. So you wanted to the user to give him a little bit of freedom to change his password, and prevent password reuse. That's mean the user cannot reuse the last 5 password he used in AWS. So this is all kind of very has a certain lens, okay, and has already password history. So the user cannot use the same password over and over. And also when he create his password, the password should be complex enough. So once you say save the setting, okay, guys, this over here, the settings that I have done over here, guys, what will happen is, this is now my password security policy, and the policy has been updated. This policy will be, will be applied for any new user that I'm gonna create. Okay, for any new user. But how about the old user? The old user will keep using the password, the same password and same old policy for at least 60 days. When they renew their password, okay, now the new policy will be applied to them. Okay, so we really need to understand this password security policy one more time, because this could be a question in the exam of the cloud. Okay, in the cloud exam. So if you have created new password policy, okay, for any user that you create, the new password would be attached to them. So they need to really have 10 characters, low complex password history will be applied to them from day one. Okay, how about existing users? Existing user, they can use the password until the next time that they need to renew their password, so 60 days. On the day of 61, the new password policy will be applied to them. That's why I'm saying that when you are an administrator for security in IAM within an organization, make sure you apply the password policy before you create any users. Okay, so you have all your users created after the password policy. But again, I just wanted to show you the password policy and how you create really strong password policy. So we created user, we created groups. Okay, we looked at the permission. Okay, we looked at also account setting and how we create account setting. Okay, all clear, guys? The most important thing from what I'm saying right now, it is free. You don't have really to pay anything to really practice rule-based access control, creating user, changing policies, and all this stuff. Okay, so let's just go back to the here and look and see what we can do. So this is the setting password policy. Okay, this is the type of access. I said that any IAM users will have two type of access. One of them to access the console, and one of them to access the CLI, which is command line interface, or SDK or APIs. So you need these both of them if you have a developer for them. For example, the developer always will love to have an access keys because he is gonna use his SDK or CLI to work on AWS. While a normal user like me, who is not a developer, who is gonna just look after the security and instance, he would love to have the GUI interface. I would highly recommend it. If you have a user who is scalable, you can create both of them and from the first beginning. Okay, guys. Uh, Here, create individual IAM user. This is some recommendation for IAM best practice. For example, use group and to assign permission to IAM user. So we have used the group to assign permission to IAM users. Grant least privilege. This is what I think one of you guys were saying, that we really need to grant enough permission to just to do their job. Okay, rotate credential regularly means that you don't have unexpired password. You have a password that's expired after a little bit of time. Remove unnecessary credentials. Mean if you have someone who used to work in your organization and then he left, okay, then you should delete him and delete his credential, because again, the problem with these kind of permission, that can it allow him to log in anytime, anywhere in the world. So you need to really remove him as soon as he leaves. Use AWS defined policies. This is what I'm saying. That's the policy, the permission. AWS, this one over here that I guys showed you, is covering almost everything. Okay, don't create your own policy. You try as much as you can to use the policy that exists already in the system, which is you attach it to a group. So this is again the policies that exist, and you can, if you wanted to really to check what this policy is doing, you can just expand the policy and look at the really content over here. So this is also a recommendation from AWS. Create an individual IAM, look away your AWS root account. Again, this is guys a root user, the one I'm using right now. It should be implemented in a secure way, and that's why we will implement multi-factor authentication. So finally, I will show you how to implement multi-factor authentication from my root account. So if I go back to my over here, I will go back to again to the dashboard. Okay, so this is the dashboard. Okay, and I can see this is saying that you don't have an MFA, a multi-factor authentication. I would say add MFA. Alas, I wanted really to add a multi-factor authentication because this is going to help me really securing the root, because the root, as I think I told you guys, is very important when it comes to billing and every service running on your instance. Okay, so here activate MFA. Okay, and here guys is saying you can use virtual FMA, you can use security key, or you can use other hardware devices. So other hardware devices mean you really need to buy a hardware device that is going to generate a certain code, and this code, you will use it every time you are logging to the service. Okay, but virtual MFA device, which is easier one, which is an application that you install in your mobile, okay, and it will generate the same token. So there is a virtual MFA and their hardware here. Okay, but you really need to take care. If you use the virtual one, don't lose your mobile, because if you lose your mobile, this is going to be a disaster, because this is the root account, and the root account is connected to here by MFA, and this virtual means it's an application installed in your telephone. If you lose this telephone, this is going to be a disaster. Okay, so make sure that's really to save this phone. Make sure. Okay, so here, guys, this is basically um, uh, uh, a QR code. When I show the QR code, I'm gonna not show it a lot because maybe you can steal it and cause me a trouble. So I'm not gonna show it a lot. So this is my QR code now. I need to first of all to download an app on my phone. So I'm gonna hit here and I'm gonna show you a list of apps. They have a list of apps that you can install on the phone. And once it's installed in your phone, guys, you can go to your QA and then scan it. So the list is gonna be two lists, one for Android and one for iOS. So if you're using another type of phones, you really need to change at this case. But again, if I'm using iOS, I have Authy, okay, which is, this is their, I would say, their favorite one, but you can still use Microsoft Authentication or Google Authenticator, and you download this from the App Store. So from whether it's Google Play or whether from the iOS store. And once you install this application, guys, the first time you hit this application, the App Store, yeah, exactly. So once you hit this application, you get a screen like this. I'm not gonna do this operation again in front of you, because if you do this operation and someone managed to steal your code, this is gonna be like really bad. So this is kind of what you have in your phone. This is Google Authenticator, and if you say scan QR code, it will scan the QR code from your browser over here. Okay, so you get your phone very close to your computer, scan the QR code. When you scan the QR code, guys, you will have to, it will create two different MFA codes. So it will create two tokens in your phone. You need to write this two token over here. Okay, once you run this two token over here, you can now activate your multi-factor authentication. Okay, so the process can be done, the multi-factor authentication, in multiple ways. Okay, using hardware or using a software. If you go for the software, basically you need to install application in your phone. There is a plenty of applications. So they authorize only 5 of them: OC, Microsoft, Google Authenticators. Okay, so they have their own list. And once you have this own list, once you have one of these applications installed in your phone, guys, what you should do is basically saying, you know what, خلاص, okay, this is now installed. Let me show you the QR code here. Okay, scan the QR code. Once you scan it, your phone will create two multi-factor authentication, and then you can activate your multi-factor authentication. Done. So every time you need to access your root account, okay, you will need to open the OC or the Microsoft Authenticator or Google Authenticator, basically to log in to your instance. Okay, guys, sorry, to your account. So this is multi-factor authentication. Okay. Last thing I wanted to talk about before we take a break, okay, or maybe we can continue if you guys want, okay, is basically is how, if I have server, the servers here, guys, in AWS, they called it EC2. So for example, if I go to my instance here that I run in let me just close this one, okay, and I will go to my EC2 again. You can go to EC2 from here, from this screen. You hit enter. Okay, when you hit enter here, it will list all the EC2's options. Okay, you have image builder, but I'm really interested to look at the EC2. I would look to also to my instance. Instance, basically servers that I created. And it's very easy to create server in EC2, sorry, in AWS. You can just say create, I wanted this operating system, and done. You have all your instance running. Okay. So it takes sometimes, I don't know why it's super slow today. Usually it doesn't really take this much. Okay, so this is EC2 global view. Let me show you guys how many servers I have. And again, my servers right now are not active because I'm not using it, so I'm switching them off. I have no idea why it's really super slow today. EC2. Okay, so this is the dashboard. Let me close this one. Okay. So if you wanted to really to launch a new server, you can just say here, I wanted to create a new server. Okay, launch an instance. Okay, and when you say launch an instance, it will show you guys which operating system you want. So I'm gonna use Amazon AWS Linux because this is a very common one. Okay, and the instance types. Okay, the key beer is basically the login that I really need to use to actually access my server. So I will use a default over here. When I use a default, I will just create key beer name is my Linux. Okay, I would create access pair. Okay, so it will create for me a username and password, so later on I can use it. Okay, and then there's no much things here to do. I will say launch an instance. So that's mean that I'm creating a server now based on operating systems called Linux from Amazon. If I wanted to check the Linux server right now, I can just hit the instance name and you can see. Unfortunately, I don't know. I used to have two instances here, but maybe I did really. Oh, sorry about this. So this is one of the mistakes that I created. I didn't really see. So this kind of instance, guys, will cost me money. Alhamdulillah that I have seen it. So what I will do, because I used tier two micro, so I said, okay, I don't want really this instance. So I'm gonna come here. This is a mistake that I have done it because I didn't really see what kind of instance. So I'm saying, you know what, I wanted really to get rid of this instance. So I will say, okay, let me terminate this instance. I don't want this server anymore. So I will terminate this instance, and then I will go to, let me just make sure that's terminated. Okay, terminate the instance. Okay, and then it's saying successfully terminated. I wanted really to create, launch another instance. This is one of the things that I wanted to show you guys. It's important also when you create an instance to create an instance which is tier free. So here, guys, okay, if you see the instance types, okay, and the instance types, let me show you something. Yeah, here, over here. See over here, this is a free tier. I wanted the most important thing when you open this, guys, you can find a lot of instance of servers, and every server comes with a different specification when it comes to the processors, when it comes to a lot of configuration. I will make sure that always I will use the free tier one. The free tier one means you can use it 750 hours per month without really paying anything. So this is something that is good that I showed you guys. And then I have to create uh, a key pair. So I will create my Linux. This is gonna be my credential to access the instance, and I'm gonna see launch the instance. It will start to launch the instance, and it will give me the name of the instance. I will hit it here. Okay, and I can see that the server is running now in the background. And if I come here, I can see I wanted to make this instance right now is saying pending, meaning it's building the server right now and building the operating system in the top of the servers. Once this pending finish, it will tell me that this server is up and running. And later on, see, it's running right now. If I hit this server one more time, there is an option here to connect to the server. So I wanted to connect to the server. I wanted to really connect to the server using, this is the instance connect, okay? So instance connect, I will say connect to the servers. It will open for me the server here, and basically in a web interface. I can show you that I am running right now, running a Linux server. Okay, Shaza is saying that my device is exploded. As you can see, this is Amazon Linux are running on this instance, and this is my first login to it. So BWD, I'm running as a root. Who am I? Okay, I'm running as a root on this instance. So I can start to play with this instance in a Linux. So this is how long it takes from you in Amazon to create a Linux server. So it takes me no time specifically. Okay, and now you can really access your instance anytime. And again, if you have this Linux running for even entire months without, it will not cause you any issues, guys. Okay, why? Because as I mentioned before, this is a free tier instance that you have almost all the months for free accessing this instance. Okay, guys. So far, so good. Okay, why I created an instance right now? Because this is what will take me to this nice diagram. Saying it's this diagram we have mentioned. If we have users, I will add this user to a group called dev, and then dev will have a certain permission, and this certain permission will allow this dev team to access maybe a database, or sorry, a storage object, so you can save files in this S3 bucket. Okay, what if I have a server here, EC2, and I wanted the EC2 to access the S3? So this is one of the service of AWS, and this is another service of AWS. How can I create an access between them? So you cannot really create a group right now, okay, because your instance here is not a human. You cannot. So what we create something called rule. So this rule will mention that your EC2 really need to access your S3 bucket. So here, guys, is how to create rules. How to create rules, basically, is you're gonna go here and go to basically the main, again, rules. Okay, rules under IAM. Okay, in the rules you will create, if you can see the rules over here, okay, it will be empty because I have not created any rules. So we'll hit, I wanted to create a rule. Okay, you will be specifying which rules. This is going to allow AWS service to communicate with another AWS service. Okay, and if you can see that you have here, it's saying the common use is allow using EC2 to connect to something, or maybe Lambda. We will talk about Lambda later on, but again, you will select trusted entity. So I'm using EC2 here, okay, to connect to someone else, okay, and then I will say next, okay, and this is in this case where you want to connect, add permission here. So you wanted to add a permission, I will add a permission for my instance to access S3 bucket. So I will say S3, it will show me all the S3 permission. I can use the permission over here from the S3 to access the S3, okay? Or you can create your own policy, which is own permission in a specific device. But I will, again, the AW recommendation is to use whatever exists here, and then finish. And the rule name here, you can say this is from EC2 instance, which is my instance, to S3, okay? And here it allow EC2 instance to call the AWS service on your, this is a description, you can write the description, you can allow saying that it is gonna be, and here it is specifying the permission, okay? And you can edit this as well, and finally, you can hit enter to create this rule. Okay, guys, once the rule is created, you can see that's is already become part of your rules, and this is will allow your ACT instance, this one, okay, to talk to and have a permission over the S3 bucket over here. Okay, guys, so this is also we have covered. So we covered now how to create user, how to create an authentication for this user using password or access key. How can we really change the policy for this user? How to add multi-factor authentication? How to create rules, and how to create groups as well. So rules and groups are different here. This is kind of, all the stuff that I wanted really to cover. This is like a small project thing. It's really, I wanted you to take you from this specific, I wanted to explain also VPC, but we will not have a VPC time today. So I'll explain it tomorrow, guys. I wanted really to reach to this level. So we'll keep this assignments for tomorrow, but if you wanted to really play with an assignment, okay, today you can really try to apply this project Omega here, okay? And the project Omega here is saying that you really need to, first of all, to have an IMC for 3 users and leaves as part of VBC, like number 3, don't touch it. I just wanted you to guys to look at how to create an AWS account free tier. And the second part is how to create account, add this account to groups, add to this groups permission, and then create S3 and EC2 instance in your environment, okay? So this is part of just what we have done today so far. Okay, I know that I took some extra time. I'm sorry about that, but I just wanted to finish this part, and we will tomorrow will cover the VBT in the more details. Okay. So far, so good, guys.
Mr. Shadi,
yes.
The extra assignment is just to create an account.
Just create an account in AWS, and then create different groups like development groups, help desk groups, and then create different users and assign these users to the groups and create one rule. This is the assignments basically.
So I think you said in the morning you wanted a diagram.
Yeah, huh? But in order to do the diagram, I'm sorry, who is talking?
It's me, I'm Maha.
Maha. In order to do the diagram, we really needed to create different VPCs. And VPC is basically like a virtual private network here. And I really need to explain VPC in order to create the diagram. So we are not yet there. I will explain it later on tomorrow so we can together create this nice diagram consists of different networks, different availability zones, and how can we connect between them.
Okay.
Okay, but for now, get your account ready and get the users IAM is ready, and maybe you can play also with a multi-factor authentication. So this will be more than enough.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shadi.
Okay, guys, thank you very much. Okay, if you guys have any questions, let me know. I'm sorry about taking much time today, but again, it's nice to have some practice environment in order to do the IAM thing. Okay, great. Thank you, and thank you everybody. I'll see you guys after.